Our MST inquiry unit is on weathering, erosion, and deposition, interactions of air, water, and land. This is for the 4th grade, Unit 4 in the KTA scope. So here we have a list of the process and content skills for science scope and math, as well as the ISTE. We have here for lesson 1 the rundown for it, and lesson 2. And we're not going to go too deep into it because it'll take a lot of time. So instead, we'll show you how these connect as we show the rubric and the student performance-based products. So here we have lesson 1. Breaking it down, this is for weathering. 1, our objective is to complete a chemical weathering observation worksheet based on chalk and vinegar experiment. 2, to complete a physical weathering observation worksheet based on the hands-on rock shaking experiment. And 3, to complete the interpreting data worksheet by creating a bar graph and pie graph by hand and using those graphs to answer all the questions on the worksheet. And lastly, to create a bar graph and a pie graph using Excel. For our lesson, we have children working in group to foster collaboration and communication. So our constructivist approach, using the Web 2.0 sources, we have first photography. First, we're going to engage students by this link here, which will show a bunch of pictures, and these pictures will be of those of physical and chemical weathering. Those will be really good examples. And then here we have the interactive website. It's a pushpin game where students, this is for students when they're done with their work, and this will help them practice more on understanding it. And this is how it kind of works. Here are the instructions of how to play. And then this is the pushpin, and then you just connect it to whichever one you think connects to it. Yeah. And then here we also created a class website for students to post their assignments, discussions, and extra information. We'll talk more about that later. Here's the rubric. You can see our behavioral objectives over here. All 4 of them are here. And for target 3, basically we have for students, the first behavioral objective, students complete the effects of chemical weathering worksheet and is excellent in details in their illustrations and matching captions, contain 0 error. And for the rundown, the second one, satisfactory, will have 1 or 2 minor errors, and unsatisfactory, which is below 75%, will have 3 or more errors. And for each of these, we actually have a very detail of how we want their work to come out. So the first one, target will always be 0 errors. Satisfactory will always be 1 or 2 minor errors. And unsatisfactory will be if students have anything missing or major components of the lesson is wrong. So here we have a graphic organizer for our assessment 1 to complete an effective chemical weathering worksheet based on the chalk experiment. And this is very visual. And for this, our inquiry skill, we have an inquiry skill of manipulating materials, making observations, and Bloom's taxonomy of knowledge and comprehension. They do this by writing before, during, and after, showing their understanding of how chemical weathering works through the experiment, and it's very visual because they actually draw out the before, during, and after. They also show that they understand the sequence of the experiment. Here we have another graphic organizer, and this one is for assessment 2 to complete a shake and break rock observation worksheet based on the rock shaking experiment. And here we also have a T-chart for the before and after. It's also very visual. And then we have a chart down here for students to record how much each group in the class, the number of rocks each group in the class had before shaking and after shaking. And our inquiry skill here is making observations, gathering, and organizing data in the chart here. Here we have assessment 3, and that's with the graph, the bar graph, the pie charts, and the graphical representation. No, I mean the congruent representation. And here for assessment 3, our math process skill is students are making a graph, a visual representation of their data, as well as making connections between the graph and their experiment. And the math content skill, students are creating pie charts of the before and after shaking to show the percentage. This is to help them realize charts can show the same information in different ways, also as numbers or percentages. And for our science, the process skills here is students will practice recording their measurement using appropriate unit, in this case, inches. And this leading them to practice turning centimeter into inches at the time. Students also manipulate materials through teacher-directed instruction and free discovery. So we lead them, we tell them the steps into doing the experiment, and then they kind of just discover and learn along the way with their colleagues as they work in their groups. The inquiry skill is they're gathering data from observation again. This also relates back to the ISTE standards of collaboration and communication. Students work within their own groups to collect and analyze data, and then collect and analyze data as a class. And also the technology, operations, and concepts. Students are required to transfer their rough drafts into final drafts on Excel with a congruent representation. And that's it. Oh yeah. Also, this is the continuation of assessment 3 and 4. And here we have questions relating to the graphs before here. This is questions such as, which group has the most amount of rocks after shaking? Which group has the least amount of rocks after shaking? Which group has the most weathering with their rocks? How do you know? Which group has the least weathering with their rocks, and how do you know? And all of these questions require students to go back to their graphs to find the answer. So that goes along with having children analyze their graphs and show that they know how to interpret their graphs.
Okay. Here's our lesson 2, erosion and deposition, carrying it away, and where does it go? And we have 5 objectives here. The first one is to highlight important key points in reading to use in answering attached questions. Number 2, to collect data from the erosion and deposition experiment and create a rough draft of a line graph by hand, representative of the serial blowing experiment. Number 3, to transfer the rough draft of the line graph onto Excel as a final draft. Number 4, to collaboratively present their conclusion about the erosion and deposition of serial final line graphs to the class. Number 5, to illustrate and combine the relationship between weathering, erosion, and deposition. And here are some links, and the reading is going to be on a website, but we're going to print it out for the students. And we have a motivation video and interactive website when they're finished with their work early. And we also have a link for them to upload their assignments. This is our assessment rubric, and target 3 would be 100%, same as before, with 0 errors, and 80% is satisfactory, which is contain 1 minor error, and below 75 is going to be having 2 or more errors. Okay, and I'm going to show you how we're going to do this with the worksheet. Okay, the first part of it is to highlight the articles. So, to highlight important key points in reading to use in answering attached questions, we're going to give them a list of questions using Bloom taxonomies, which lead them to higher thinking. And this would be for example, number 3, name one human activity that can limit the amount of erosion. So when they're reading the article, they're going to find some examples and they could think about how they could relate to it and limiting the amount of erosion on their normal activity at home.
Critical thinking and research.
Critical thinking and researching. And then assessment 2 is going to be collecting data from the traveling serial. So we're going to have serial and a fan, and the fan's going to go from low, medium, and high, and they're going to measure it, how far it went. They're allowed to use different units, but for this one we use inches, and you could tell that when you turn the fan the highest, it goes the furthest. And this is creating a model, displaying information with the inquiry skills, and this is interpersonal as well because they're working with their group. And also this is from the NCTM content skills because they're measuring using the appropriate tools, which will be the ruler for this case, and using the appropriate measurements. For assessment 3 and 4, they're going to apply digital tools to process data and report results. So for 3, they're transferring their information into Excel. And for objective 4, they're going to present their graph to their peers. They're going to analyze the step-by-step process of erosion to deposition, and they're communicating through their graph, which is the NCTM math skill, the process skill. And then for objective 5, they're going to illustrate and combine the relationship between weathering, erosion, and deposition in creating landforms. So this is pretty much putting the pieces together from weathering, erosion, and deposition that they've been learning to make connection. And
synthesis.
Yeah, this is going to be the synthesis part. And then, yeah.
That's it?
Oh, and then this is some of the stuff that we said. It is important to bring children to the museum because it is critical for children to explore through their senses, differentiating of learning, real life experience, and tactile experience, and it's a fun way of learning.